Good morning, everybody. I'm Craig Willis, CEO of Eco Energy, not to be confused with Eco Engineers, which happens more often than you would think. I've had it happen a couple times just here in the last few hours. Good people at Eco Engineers, by the way. So I'm here today to introduce Pablo, DC. Pablo, I've known about 5 years. He sits on the board of our parent company at Eco Energy, Sucre. And Pablo has seen a lot in the automotive world. So his most recent role was president and CEO of Volkswagen North America. Prior to that, Pablo was CEO and president of Volkswagen Latin America. And in that role, he got to see and was hands-on with higher-level blends of ethanol and higher-level blends of biodiesel. He has a very unique view at the world. Where he sits on the board of Sucre. A lot of you may not know who Sucre is, but they're the largest sugar marketer in the world. They're also the largest ethanol marketer in Brazil. So Pablo is one of us. I mean, he knows the benefits of the ethanol. He knows our advocacy as globally, and he's got a unique view of the world. Our executive team visited one of the plants that reported up to him. I guess it's been probably 2 or 3 years ago in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they had ICE technology, battery technology. So with that, want to kick it off to Pablo. He's got a few slides here. He'll give an overview for 6-7 minutes, and then we've got a few questions cooked up, and hopefully you in the audience be thinking of questions and use that QR code, and if we have time, we'll get to those also. So,
thank you, Craig. Good morning to all. Thanks to Monty and Lisa for inviting me. It's an honor for me to be here. I'd like to put into context some of the things that are going on in the industry, and then some policy issues that we developed in Brazil that have been very successful to increase the amount of ethanol, not only from E22 to 27 to E30, but also to stimulate pure ethanol within the vehicles. But I don't need to tell you what's going on in the global economy, the supply chains, and the policy changes that have been happening in the US and around the world. So 5 years ago, with all these EV mandates, consumers were, I would say, incentivized to have very affordable vehicles. So the penetration of the electric vehicles went from 3-4% to 12%. And then when those were taken away and the market normalized, right now they're traveling around 6%, and you see a lot of write-offs on these huge EV investments over the last couple of weeks or months. The auto market globally, it's pretty healthy. It's growing despite all these changes in technology and in geopolitics. So in the good old days, 20 years ago, you would develop a car, a platform, and then you would roll that vehicle across different regions. That would allow you to have a $1 billion investment spread around many regions. Well, that world is gone because now you have different policies, different technologies, and different supply chains. So the work got a lot more complicated, and I think people need to be cautious on what they bet in the next vehicle segment for the next 5 to 10 years. So you'll see in the graphic what I've been saying is that you see the rapid increase on electric vehicles, this is the US, from the early 2020s until last year, and then with the policy change, things are coming back to a normal demand. And then hybrid, and I've been supporting hybrid for the last 10 years, because you have the best of both worlds. You have gasoline, ethanol, and a small battery pack. And in Brazil, we developed the hybrid flex, which is being launched. So to simplify, you have the internal combustions, then you have the hybrids, and within hybrids, you have the mild hybrids, the super hybrids, then the battery electrics, and fuel cell electric vehicles. So, I mean, when you look at the range of technology and investments for the auto industry, if you invest on all of these at the same time and you're wrong, then you have massive write-offs and you're not going to survive. I will talk on one of the slides on policy on zero tailpipe because we did change the law in Brazil, and I will explain in the next couple of slides. So this is one level down on the technology. You see on the far left, electric vehicles, BEVs. Then you have hybrids, plug-in hybrids, EREVs. Again, all of these are different technologies, different engineers. If you multiply these by the different regions, then it's a never-ending story. So you need to be extremely careful if you're in the auto industry. And I've always been a supporter of the middle portion, HEVs and PHEVs, and I always said that electric vehicles will be a niche, at least for the next 10 or 20 years. This is the slide I was referring to that I would like to spend a minute or two. When you look around policies around the world on the automotive industry, they all look at the tailpipe. And I think that is fundamentally wrong. We got together with the agricultural industry in Brazil, with the policymakers, we hired some scientists, and we look at the cradle-to-grave concepts. So it doesn't matter what the tailpipe is, as long as you look at the entire chain of supply chain of that particular vehicle. So when you're looking at an electric vehicle, you need to consider that some of the minerals are being harvested out of Congo, or China, or Australia, shipped around the world, manufactured, put together, ship it again. So you need to look at the entire CO2 chain. And when you have that full picture, then the view of a green vehicle changes. And I'll tell you, in Brazil, a flex hybrid is significantly greener than an electric vehicle because the battery travels all over the world. So, listening to the panel and to the last couple of hours, E15 is great. I fully support it, but I think the U.S. needs to go a step further and try to change the cradle-to-grave concept. Because if you do that, then there's going to be a bigger demand for ethanol in the U.S. So this is all the undoings of EPA and all these really tough EPA rules that we had over the last couple of years. That is gone. And with that gone, then you have all these write-offs, right? So you have $20 billion for Ford, $10 billion in GM, $25 billion plus for the Volkswagen Group. And then they're trying to convert all these factories into something useful. So, Ford is trying to study how to make batteries for homes, or, Tesla is trying to see if they can do Optimus, the robots. So you have a huge investment that was done and an empty factory nowadays. I'm not saying this because I'm in Iowa. I've been saying this for the last 10 years. I supported the ethanol industry in Brazil for the longest time. In one of the articles, which is in Portuguese, they said that my biggest legacy is the support to ethanol, because I really believe that you can reduce the CO2 without any further infrastructure on electric vehicles, and then you generate employment that stays within the country. So, but that is critical if you change the policy. So you always need to go back to policy and say, how can we effectively change the policy to increase the demand for ethanol? So that's it, Craig, and we're going to go to the best part, which is the Q&A.
Great recap, great overview. Remind all of you, if you have questions, fire them at Pablo. I know we've given a lot of him the times we've spent in front of him over the years. So first question, one of them we had here. So during your time at VW, many automakers seemed all in, just what you just talked about on EVs, despite maybe consumers weren't all in on the product. There were a lot of concerns about rare earth metals, the electric grid. Yep. I mean, you were on the inside. What was that discussion like?
Yeah, the discussion is, I will go a layer down on some of the things I said about investment. So this didn't happen only at VW, it happened at all OEMs. So if you have combustion engines and the technology that's been with us for 100 years. And then if you believe, and you have to believe, and everybody believed in this, almost everybody, 99%, that the future will be electric, then you say, okay, why am I going to invest in these intermediate technologies? And that was a discussion that I had at VW for the longest time. Say, well, what if this doesn't happen? Then what's going to happen? So it's a strategic discussion. Every time you make an investment, you need to think about the next 10, 15 years. And what are the consequences if that pays off and if it doesn't pay off? All automakers were in, all consulting, they charge millions of dollars. Everybody was saying back then that the penetration in the US for electric vehicles was going to be 30% by 2030. So again, when you allocate capital, I always run the company like it was my own. Said, listen, let's be careful with this. You visited Chattanooga, the factory, and we had a line for electric vehicles and a combustion engine. And to me, it's critical to have that flexibility.
Yeah. So clearly, there's a group of consumers like EVs. They want an EV. Yeah. How do you see the EV market on a go-forward basis here in the U.S. and globally, for that matter?
I think the application of electric vehicles is good if you're a special type of consumer. For example, if you are in a town that has tons of electricity, then you have a house, for example.
Yeah.
The last mile, if you work for Amazon, and the last mile, but again, those are niches. When somebody drives an EV, and I drove an EV for 6 months, and I held a lot of customer clinics with consumers with EVs, and the main complaint, and I'll tell you now as a consumer, that you have is that you need to change your life around the vehicle. Because now you have to look at the app, where are the charging stations? Is there enough energy in those charging stations? Is there a line? And I always said that a vehicle needs to take you from point A to point B. Obviously, you want it in a safe way, with safety, with comfort. But if it doesn't achieve that, then why would you have a vehicle? So I think the EV has its space. Technology will continue to improve. But there's most customers right now, at a normalized demand, it's below 6% in the US.
So not every country went crazy on EVs.
No.
We had countries like China went pretty all in. But you were in Latin America for part of this, Brazil. What did you see there? What kind of insights do you have?
Yeah, my journey with biofuel started when I was 2017. Everybody was talking about EVs. And I look at Volkswagen, I look at Brazil, and I said, Brazil will never, as a country, will never have an EV factory. Will never have, just the battery, it will cost you 5-6 billion euros to set up a battery factory. So I said, listen, there needs to be a better way to reduce CO2 and stimulate the economy. And to me, my answer was ethanol. Why are you going to invest in infrastructure with money that you do not have, energy that you don't have, transmission lines that you don't have? And what if you increase the amount of ethanol that you put in the vehicle, you're going to reduce 80% of CO2 versus gasoline, 80, without doing one investment. Yeah. And I always said, listen, you need to think about the long term, but also the speed that you can reduce CO2. And that's why we changed the law to include the cradle to grave.
So the news is full of automakers write-offs. You had a slide on it.
Yep.
Where do these companies go from here? They've taken the write-offs. What do they do, or how do you see that on a go-forward basis?
Well, what I'm going to tell you is public. No, you look at the newspaper. Some CEOs are still saying that electric is the future. The CFO of a major American company yesterday said that they can bear losses because they're doing combustion engines. So, it blows my mind that people are still having these thoughts. I think it's going to be a longer journey for those that choose to go that path. There's some companies that are adapting faster than others. Look at Toyota and Honda. They never bought on this EV hype. They said, listen, we'll have 1 or 2 cars in that space as a niche, but the majority will be on hybrids. I think Stellantis is doing a pivot pretty fast. into hybrids. I think Ford also is pivoting fast. So it depends. But we'll see. Time will tell. And who's going to make a decision? And that will be the consumers.
So are automakers pursuing multi-pathway strategies?
It'll be tough, Greg.
Yeah.
Because if you choose a multi-path with all the technologies that I show you, it'll be, I don't know, 4 to 5 billion per platform. You get 20, 30, 40 billion dollars, and the OEMs, the automakers don't have that kind of money anymore. So I believe that they will choose carefully, maybe on 2 platforms, and the rest will go into the back burner.
Do you see any trends, this is one from the audience, do you see any trends developing of diesel passenger vehicles that would increase demand for biodiesel? IORFA is both ethanol and biodiesel producers.
Yeah, I supported also diesel and biodiesel in Brazil. I think there's a huge case for biodiesel when you look into the trucking industry and you convert 10, 20, 30% of the diesel into biodiesel. But again, you go back to policy.
Yeah.
And then the major issue in Brazil, and I'm not so sure on the diesel here in the US, is the distribution, right? How do you distribute the diesel? So if you have the distribution in the US, then it's possible.
So we hate to admit it, but Brazil's been a leader on biofuels for many, many years. How's Brazil working to reduce emissions on diesel?
So I'll tell you from a pilot that we're running at Copersucar.
Yeah.
So we're looking at biodiesel, we're looking at biogas. So, in Brazil, you have corn and you have sugarcane. So some units, they also have biogas. So if you can effectively replace for your own internal fleet, and that's our pilot, if you can run that and reduce the amount of diesel which is imported in Brazil, then you reduce the cost, you reduce the CO2, and you get credits from the government. So it's a win-win-win situation. Then on the other side, there's some blends on biodiesel as well that is reducing the CO2, but that's a bit more complicated because you need to calibrate the truck.
How do you feel about FFVs here in the States? We've had policy that we're seeing a phase out on flex fuel vehicles.
Yep.
Any thoughts from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think the industry here needs to have a more comprehensive view on the emission vehicle cycle, what I described before, and not be only content on E15. Obviously, E15 will be great. I think Monte presented a very good chart on demand and productivity and production of corn. And for the short term, absolutely go all in. Hopefully, Congress signs the E15. But I will look more at the overreaching policy, how to increase this by 5 or 6 times. Because if you do that, and it will not be easy. I mean, it took us 5 years in Brazil to do that journey. Then you triple, quadruple your market.
Yeah.
Then it's worthwhile.
Yeah. Different type of question. So, at Eco Energy, we trade natural gas. Yep. We have solar. We're watching electricity with a lot of you in the audience. I mean, there's a lot of big electric bills sitting out there in these seats. How does that world look? How does a Volkswagen or the big car companies think about that? And where are the bottlenecks on, if EVs were to get more material, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, so that's one of the issues. The auto industry in general never looked at other industries.
Yeah.
And I realized in 2017 when I started talking to ethanol. So there are many studies that the energy around the world will grow at a minimum 2% per year when you have cryptocurrency, data centers. So where all this energy is going to come from? So I've always been a supporter of ethanol, biofuels, solar, wind, whatever it is that will get you energy. I think you're going to get a constraint on the amount of energy that you get in the world. And you put the climate challenges that we're having nowadays, extreme heat or extreme cold, and then you have no energy. So again, any renewable energy that can increase the capacity, I'll support it. But then it's not only that, then you need the transmission. And that's where the issue is. I mean, when you look, going back, pivoting to electric vehicles, if you have an electric vehicle and you go to a charging station, the electricity needs to get there somehow, right?
Yeah.
And then each one of these chargers, they put through 350 kilowatts, which is a lot. And then you multiply that by 10, so then you need like an electrical substation in whatever is the place that you put it on. So you need to think about all these things. The system did not think about this in an overreaching way. And that's one of the failures.
How are other countries handling that?
Well, they didn't go on EVs.
Yeah.
Or they went all EVs. I mean, you look at Denmark or Norway, they went all EVs, right? You look at Brazil, they didn't give any benefits for EVs. I said, they didn't penalize them. I said, let the consumer decide.
Yeah.
There's a new law in Brazil effective this year for the next couple of years that the automakers will get a credit on the development if the new developments reduce the number of CO2. But how you reduce the CO2 is based on the cradle to grave concept. So they put everybody on the same page.
You know, we've got all types of different people sitting here in the audience, and one of them asked if you could define cradle to grave a little bit, just a little more detail.
Sure. So cradle to grave is how you start on your vehicle, the supply chain, right? So let's talk about an electric vehicle, and then let's talk about a combustion engine. So what are the components that are part of an electric vehicle? So you have all type of raw materials, right? Lithium, cathodes, whatever is the mineral. You need to extract those minerals, again, from Congo, from Australia, from China, from Chile, from Bolivia. You need to extract them. Well, you need excavators to extract them. You need to compute that CO2. Then they go to a silo somewhere in Chile, let's say. There's a truck, a diesel truck that takes them somewhere. Then they go processing. Most of the processing is done in China. So there's a ship that takes them to China. There's another step of CO2. Then it goes to the US or to Europe, and then you have a battery manufacturing. Well, it's another leg of CO2. Then you go into vehicle production, then there's another leg of CO2. So if you compute that cradle to grave, then you have a complete different picture versus when you look at the tailpipe. Because when you look at the tailpipe, you just do not see all the CO2 emissions that are on the entire supply chain. It's a complete different concept. And then the grave is, on an electric vehicle, what are you going to do with that battery 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Is it going to be recycled? What's going to be the cost? What's going to be the CO2? So again, when you look at the entire cycle, then you have a complete different CO2 vision on the tailpipe versus cradle to grave. And you do the same concept. Let's go to a hybrid flex car, which we did in Brazil. So you say, okay, I have corn or I have sugarcane doing ethanol. But then, whether it's corn or sugarcane, then you have bioelectricity, biogas. You have all these other things that reduce the CO2 of the farm that is computed into the cradle to grave. Then you go into the vehicle manufacturing, and then you also measure the tailpipe. When you do that, the hybrid flex, it has significantly less emissions than an electric vehicle.
So, big biofuel group here, obviously. We like higher level blends. What do automakers face when you think about calibrating engines for higher level blends? Like what goes into that? And
that's an issue.
Inside baseball.
No, but that's an issue. I mean, Brazil has great technology, which is available everywhere. They've been doing this for the last 30 years. So you do have to have a different calibration when you go above 25, 27%. Yeah. Just remember that in Brazil, the gasoline has 27%. It will go to 30, and then you can also buy only ethanol. So you need a different type of calibration. So you do need to spend some money, which is not huge in the scheme of investments. Mm-hmm. But that technology is available with Bosch and many suppliers around the world. It's not like it's going to be a new development if that comes to the US.
Looking ahead to 2035, what role do you believe biofuels must play to realistically meet climate and mobility goals?
I think as much as possible. You don't need to convince me that biofuel, that ethanol reduces CO2. We did a study within BW with the engineers on the CO2 cycle. So these were engineers within the company. And there were many, many studies that showed that ethanol does indeed reduce CO2 when you look at the cradle to grave consumption. So I think E15 is immediate, should be hopefully signed, but I don't think the US should be only content with E15. I think should aim higher than that.
So we've got perceptions on our side on consumer education relative to biofuels. How do you think about that from the automaker side?
That's huge.
Yeah.
Listen, I'll give you an example in Brazil, and then you'll see the challenge in the US. I work at Fiat Chrysler, and then I work at Volkswagen. So I did a lot of customer clinics in a country that has flex fuel cars for the last 30 years. There were many consumers that didn't know that they had a flex fuel car. So education is a key part of this journey, whether you're in Brazil, whether you're in the US, to communicate the benefits of most of the things that were discussed here, the benefits of CO2, the benefits of employment, the benefits that trickles down in the economy overall. And that's not, let's do it this month or this year. This needs to be in a consistent way to communicate across all consumers.
Other than this is a question from the audience, and if you have more, keep them coming here, but other than pure ICE engines, what engine is VW supporting today?
So in general, most OEMs stopped the development of engines about 3-4 years ago, right? Because of the investment cycles that I just described. So all the new engines that you're going to see coming up, they will be slightly improvements on older versions. There's not going to be a new development of an engine for the next, I would say, 10 years. Unless, consumers say, I don't want an EV, which I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to see on engines are smaller engines, and Volkswagen has a great technology on engines, which are turbo because you have less horsepower from an engine point of view, but being turbo, you have more torque. So the acceleration is great, and the consumption is very low. So I think Volkswagen has great technology on engines, even though that OEMs will not invest. I think there's a good base of engines coming forward. I read that Stellantis will bring back the V8 and maybe the V12 on some of the applications. But again, these are not new developments. They will bring them back, improve them a little bit, and move them forward. And then the consumer will tell, Craig, if there's a spike in combustion engine or hybrids, maybe there will be some additional investments. But I don't see a huge amount of investments on engines.
Is there a market today for renewable fuels that you think we're not exploring or should be?
Listen, the discussions that I heard today are very similar to the ones we're having in Brazil. And I love the way Monte positioned this. The easiest way is just, okay, let's close some plants, right? That's not the way. Yeah. You need to increase demand. So I have a lot of hope on the marine industry. From a SAF point of view, I'm a board member at a Brazilian company that we have an airport. And I talked to some of the customers, and the main issue that they have is, yeah, we support CO2, but the cost, kerosene versus ethanol, is 3 times as much. So, I've been brainstorming with engineers in Brazil. It's like, how can we have a cheaper ethanol that make a compelling case to the owners of aircrafts to switch? I think technology and innovation might take us there, but I think there's a gap on cost that we as an industry, now I'm talking about ethanol, we need to bring down So, we can put it in SAF. It's going to be, I don't want to say easier, but it's going to be a shorter period of time on the marine industry because they already have the applications. And there's still a gap on cost, but not as much on SAF. Yeah.
We've got a few minutes left here, so again, if you have any questions here as we wrap up, I'll take a look at them here. How about a little different subject, autonomy, autonomous vehicles? I mean, that's a popular subject right now, not directly maybe related to biofuels, but it could drive demand down the line. I mean, very complex, obviously.
Yeah. Autonomous driving is great, I'm telling you, because I was running a pilot in Texas when I was the CEO of Lion. Great vehicle, great technology, super expensive. The amount of investments that you need is huge. Again, I think it's going to be a huge niche in some cities or when you go to the airport, but it's extremely expensive. You have 4 or 5 different type of technologies on sensors that the car needs to be there. You need to be always online. So you need a lot of investments to make it happen. So I think, yeah, it's a reality. Unless there's a huge breakthrough in technology, the cost will continue to be high, and I think the penetration will be tougher.
You know, over the years when I've made calls on companies that buy ethanol and we talk about E15 and higher level blends, they ask a lot of questions about, can the farmer produce the crop? And it's same in Brazil or here. How do the OEMs, Volkswagen, how did you guys, what kind of discussions did you have there?
But that's the issue. When I started talking about this, they didn't talk to each other. We didn't know the relationship between ethanol and OEMs. And I started that discussion with them. There has never been an issue of production. I mean, the farmers in Brazil, here in the US, are very smart, very competitive. So the productivity usually outruns the demand. And that's the issue. That's why we see the prices that we have. So we never had an issue of shortage of ethanol within Brazil.
Yeah.
Let me make one more point, Craig, let me go back to electric vehicles from a consumer point of view. Because we discussed this last night with you and with Monte. If you think of somebody buying an electric vehicle, let's say last year, and you look at the life cycle of the vehicle, if it's going to last 10, 20 years, this is a fact. Most people that bought an electric vehicle last year, you lost 50% of depreciation in 1 year. So when you have that vehicle, and as time goes by, some people that cannot afford the electric vehicle today, they will buy them in 3, 4, 5 years. As the technology is a lot more complex on these vehicles, I don't think that the people that are in the lower levels of social economy in the US or any other country, they're going to be able to afford or they want those vehicles. So when you have a problem with the resale value, then you start rethinking, okay, but if I buy this car, what's going to happen? So I think in 2, 3, 5 years, this is going to hit in a huge way in the US market when you have all these vehicles that were starting to sell from 2016 to 2022, hit the second tier or third tier secondary market. And that you're going to see another implosion of EVs.
Well, and that comment you made last night, and I've heard it from others, you might be better off if you're going to have an EV, lease the vehicle, and not pay for it. Because
some people love the driving of EV, and I think they're fun.
Yeah.
So if you're one of those customers and it works for you, lease it. It works, and then 2 years from now you say, okay, here's the key. See you, because the technology is changing so much and so rapidly that you're going to get stuck with a technology that maybe in 2 years is too old.
Yeah. Last question here from the audience. Is there a good source of public info on the cradle to grave, the study that Volkswagen did?
Yeah, I'll send it to Monte and to Lisa.
Okay.
We did the studies, we published them. If you look at the internet, you'll see it, but I'll send them to them.
Okay.
I opened a biofuel center in Brazil, at Volkswagen Brazil, and then I publish all these studies publicly. So yeah, there's plenty. And then we hired also some consulting companies, I think Boston Consulting and some of the big names, and they did a study of cradle to grave as well.
I lied. We got one more question in there. Do you see growing demand for CNG-powered heavy-duty vehicles? Any thoughts on that, or the cost too high for the technology?
Yeah, the cost is too high. I think, we tried that in Brazil many years ago.
Yeah.
The distribution and the cost is, and then the weight. So maybe in big trucks, but we try them. When I used to work at Fiat, we did tetra fuel. We did 4 fuels. So you have gasoline, ethanol, flex fuel, and then gas. We put a tank, and it didn't go well for the consumer.
I can imagine.
No, I mean, it was a good idea. I mean, you have 4 different fuels. If you think you're a consumer, you have 4 options of fuel, but then the weight of the tank, and the space, right? Because you lose a huge amount of space trunk. So maybe in some applications, not in cars.
Okay, well, great. Appreciate you making the trip to Iowa, and thanks for answering this question.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you.